I just want to tell all the students and parents who feel that they have missed our lessons yesterday, you can always watch in Tibet TV's YouTube channel, and you can search for online teaching. And there you can get all the classes that have been covered so far. So you don't need to worry if you have missed any classes. You can always go and search in the YouTube channel of Tibet TV. Okay. So yesterday we talked about narrative writing. So in my 2 sessions yesterday we discussed in a way I introduced you different types of writing, and I also told you that our main focus will be on the 4 main categories or types of writing, that is narrative, descriptive, expository and persuasive writing. So yesterday and today, so the 2 days we will be covering narrative and descriptive writing. Okay, so if you can just quickly review and try to recall what you have learned yesterday about narrative writing. So I remember I told you yesterday that the word narrate, if you try to look at the word narrate, right, so then you can understand what actually is a narrative writing. It's narrating something. It's a sort of story. Okay, you are narrating an incident, an event or an experience you are sharing with the readers, right? So I also told you that narrative writing can be broadly classified as fictional and non-fictional narratives. Do you remember that? Good. So taking this platform, I also want to tell my viewers, because there are a lot of people who keep asking which class, is it for class 9 or 10? See, I think at the very beginning we have made it very clear that though our focus is on classes 5 to 8, but that doesn't mean that students of class 9 onwards cannot watch, because there are a lot of things that you can relate with, that you can learn, because we are not focusing on the syllabus that is in your textbook. We are not dealing with the textbook that you are being taught, right? We are, Gideon Sargila and I, we both are in a way trying to deal with the language skills and the common language standards that we expect in that the level, right, class 5 to 8, and even I think class 9 onwards as well. So you can always watch it. Okay, so without thinking that, oh, this is for class 5 to 8, so and I'm in class 9, so this I have nothing to do with this lessons. It is not so. All right. Okay. So going back to what we learned yesterday in our narrative writing part, I told you that it's a sort of event or incident or a story that you share with your reader, and it can be based on fact. It is something that has happened to you, or it can be out of your imagination, right? And that is fictional. And non-fictional is something that is real. Okay, you have experienced that, or maybe you have seen someone experience that. So usually like narrative writing can be written as written in the first person if it's a personal narrative. And if you remember yesterday in one of my sessions, I discussed with you on personal narrative, and I shared with you an incident that happened with me. And in all the writings, I have kept using I, me, my, because this is something that has personally happened with me. And this sort of writing is called, yes, personal narrative. Okay, so today in the first session, I'm going to talk about another type of narrative writing, okay, and that is story. So look at the slide. Okay, so yesterday I discussed with you personal narrative. Okay, so this was already covered yesterday. Now I'm going to story. Okay, so you have an idea what personal narrative is, right? So you are discussing, you are sharing through writing an incident or an event that has happened to you personally, or that is personal narrative, right? And since this is an incident that has happened to you, and it becomes a part of non-fictional narrative. Okay, so story. So the story can be real or it can be imaginary. Okay, so you all know what a story is. Okay, so but we will look at a story in through an angle that is required of narrative writing or as a type of writing. So today we will just look at story as a type of writing. So look at the slide, please. So a story is narrating of real or imaginary events in which the characters can be real or imaginary people, like I told you, because a story can be real or it's a sort of something that has come out of your imagination. It's not real, so that's fictional. Okay, and something that is real, that has happened to you, it's non-fictional. Okay, and then yes, a story can be long or short. A story has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. So this is a very important thing that you need to remember when you write a story. There has to be a beginning and a middle and an ending. Okay. So the events in a story, okay, must follow a proper order. So you cannot write the events in a story in haphazard manner. Okay, so it should follow a proper sequence, a proper order. Is it clear? And it consists of 5 basic or main elements, and that is very important. So whenever you write a story or whenever you read a story, you please look for these 5 main elements, and let's see what are these 5 main elements. Okay. So character, it is a must. In every story there is character. Okay, you can have multiple characters, okay, or just 1 or 2 characters. So character is important. One of the main elements of a story is character, and the second one is setting. Okay, where, okay, when, where, okay, these are part of the setting. Okay, where your story is happening. And then plot. Okay, so a kind of theme you have in a story. Okay, the problem. So the character, the main character, the protagonist of the story might be facing a problem. He or she has a conflict to resolve. So this is the problem. Okay, and a solution or resolution. Clear? So these are the 5 main elements of a story. So at your level. Okay, otherwise, like, you can in a way think of 7 or 8 elements. You can think of point of view. Okay, you can talk about theme as well. Okay, so the main 5 elements of a story are this, right? Character, setting, plot, problem, and solution, conflict and resolution. Is that clear? Okay, so we will go at look at one by one the parts of a story. Okay, so beginning of a story. So like I told you that a story has to have the 3 main parts, that is beginning, middle, and ending. So here I just want you to focus on, okay, what your beginning of a story should look like. What are the things that you need to keep in mind? Okay, it is the first part of the story. Okay, so beginning is always the first part of the story, no doubt, right? And here the writer tries to hook the readers. Okay, see, this becomes very important because if you are not able to hook the readers, do you think the readers would continue reading your story? Of course not, right? So you have to be very, very careful when you start writing your story, because this is where you are going to attract your readers. You are going to hook your readers so that the readers would like or want to read. Okay, so otherwise, see, your readers are not going to read your story, because the purpose behind writing your story is you want to share something, right? You want to tell your readers about something, isn't it? And if your beginning is not interesting, okay, the readers won't read your story. They will feel like, I'm not interested in this. Okay, so you have to make it very interesting, has to be catchy in order to attract the readers. right? And so you have to spend some time while planning. Okay, and if you remember, we talked about the writing process in our previous session. See, everything is linked, right? Even if you write a story, if you write a paragraph or essay. So yesterday Gitin Sagila also told you, whatever you write, you have to follow the writing process. Okay, if you want to improve your write-up, if you want to see that whatever you have written is worth reading, okay, so you have to follow the writing process. And if you just quickly try to remember the steps that we follow while properly following a writing process, I just give you some time, think about it, try to recall what are the things that you do while writing, following the process of writing. Yes. I guess you all are just trying to think about pre-writing, right? Is this one top point that you remember? Am I right? Did you remember pre-writing? Yes, the word itself is pre-writing. Before you write, this is the planning stage where you plan, right? This is the stage or where you decide what are you going to write, okay? And then how are you going to write, isn't it? Before you make your first draft. Okay, remember pre-writing, and then you start writing and drafting. That is your first draft. And after that, what do? Of course, you revise, isn't it? Whatever you have written. See, I told you earlier also, you cannot just immediately start writing something and then submit it to your teacher or share with a reader or friend. What you need to do is you need to revise. You need to read what you have written. And you have to look for areas where you need to make some changes or add something, or you may just cut out some section of the write-up, isn't it? So that your writing becomes better. And after revising, what you do is, if you remember, yes, editing. You do editing part after that, isn't it? You edit and then you proofread. You look for any punctuation mistakes, you look for spelling mistakes, and you look for if you have capitalized the words properly or not, isn't it? Or whether your paragraphs are indented or not. So you look for everything. And then finally what you do is you rewrite before you publish or share with others. Do you remember that? Yes. So even for writing a story, you have to follow the writing process. Okay? You have to follow the writing process. So even if you write a story, what we need to do is you follow the writing process. Follow the writing process. So the first thing is, see, it's not easy, right, for a student or even grown-ups to just sit down and write a story, because you need ideas, isn't it? You cannot just sit and start writing a story. It doesn't come out naturally. You need to have ideas. And how do you do that? So you just follow different pre-writing strategies like we discussed, right? Free writing, you keep on writing whatever comes to your mind, and even when nothing comes to your mind, you just keep writing. Okay, nothing is coming in mind, nothing is coming in mind, I can't think of anything, what should I write? You keep on writing without stopping, and then at some point you get some idea what are you going to write on. Anything that comes to your mind. You can think about an event, you can think about what is important to you, right? You can think about anything, and then you feel like, oh, this is something that I am going to write about. This is something where I can write more. I have more feelings, right? So you need to follow the pre-writing strategies, okay? Follow the writing process. So this is a quick review of the writing process so that you can connect with what we are learning, because I have been telling you that whatever we are learning is not isolated, everything is connected, okay? So like if for 1 week if you have learned writing process, the next week you are learning types of writing, but when you are learning types of writing, you cannot forget writing process because it's connected all. right? All types of writing are a result of a proper following of writing process. Okay, pre-writing, then you have writing and drafting. Okay, this is just to quickly help you revise what you have learned. Okay, pre-writing, you have writing, and then revising. After revising, what we do is editing and proofreading. Very important part. Okay. And finally, what we do is we rewrite and publish. Okay. Publish doesn't mean that you need to go to a printer and get your writer printed. Okay. It's a sort of like you need to rewrite in a fair copy and then share it with your friends, okay, or your teacher, either through reading or you can just submit the written piece. Okay, so this is just to help you quickly go through the writing process. So why I am discussing this is to let you understand that whenever you write, you think of writing a story, you have to spend some time here. Okay, you need to plan because this is very important. At the planning stage, here you need to spend some time because this is where you are going to decide what are you going to write and how are you going to write, right? And now you have, what you have to keep in mind is you have to keep in mind the elements of a story, okay? The elements. So what are the elements? You have the character, isn't it? You have to think about the setting as well. You have to think about the plot and then what sort of problem or conflict you are going to mention or state in the story, and that's very important. Okay, and finally whether the problem is solved or not. Okay, all these things are very important. So the first thing you need to think about is you can either begin with thinking about your setting or you can think about the characters. Who would be the characters in my story? Would they be some real characters or you want to create something, some imaginary characters, right? So here you need to think about, okay? So this is where you are like following the writing process because this is pre-writing stage, the planning stage. So think about what characters would suit your story and then you can think about how the characters would look like. You have to, because the readers will not be able to see. You have to make them see. Okay, you are not going to tell your readers, but you have to show your readers. And how you are going to show them? Vivid description. If you remember, Gedin Thagila yesterday discussed in his session, descriptive writing. So you have to appeal to the 5 senses. Okay, so vivid description is very important. The details you have to give. Okay, where the story or the event is happening. Okay, you can talk about which time, okay, at what time this is happening, and you can talk about who is the main character. And what you need to remember is too many characters in a story can confuse the readers. So at your level, try to keep the characters limited. Okay. So in order to think about the elements, the first thing is like character, you decide, okay, who are going to be the characters, okay, in your story. So you spend some time, okay, and like if you spend sufficient time in your pre-writing stage, the planning stage, so I'm going to tell you your story will develop in a better way. Okay, if you don't plan, so a lot of things may come up in between and then it would in a way confuse you, right? So I hope you will keep that in mind. Okay, now look at the slide. The writer tries to hook the readers, I told you. So, okay, so before I tell you about this, let me tell you. So how are you going to hook your reader? What can be the strategies that you can adopt in order to, this is what I'm telling you, hook the readers means to attract the reader, right? How are you going to do that? You can in a way begin your story with a sound, okay? So if you remember yesterday I discussed with you my personal narrative. in order to show that there's a thunderstorm, what did I do? Drum! It was around 10 p.m. Right? The sound in a way attracts the readers. Oh, what's happening there? So the reader might be interested to see or know what is actually going to happen. Or you can begin your story with a question. You can pose a question to the reader so that the reader gets connected. Okay, and they would want to read more, right? Or you can begin your story with a description of the character, or you can just make your character a strange thing, like you just start describing that. So you can try to hook your readers in so many different ways, right? Okay, and then now look at the slide. This part of the narrative, that means the beginning of the story. Okay, this is where your who, where, and when of the story is established. That means who is the characters in your story. Okay, where means the setting, where your story is happening, and time means when. So who, where, and when of the story is established at the beginning of the story, right? And sometimes you can just begin from the where and when. You can introduce the characters later, or maybe you can begin with the character and then a little later you can introduce the where and when of the story. Okay, and see, casting of the characters can be done after the setting as well. So, or the vice versa, right? You can start talking about the setting and then later you can talk about the character, or you can start with character, or you can start all together, right? Who, where, and when you can begin together. Okay, so the writers have the freedom to choose, okay, depending on what they want to write, right? Okay. So another points to look at when you are writing the beginning of your story. So sometimes the problem, usually the problem is introduced in the middle of the story, but sometimes it can be introduced at the beginning of the story as well. Okay. There's no hard and fast rule that the problem has to be introduced in the middle of the story. You can introduce that at the beginning of the story as well. Okay. And like I told you earlier, too many characters can lead to confusion. So try to keep your characters in the story limited. Okay. And then planning for the details of the character needs some time during pre-writing, I told you earlier. Okay. So you have to spend some time in order to plan the details of the character. Clear? Okay, then let's look at the middle of a story. Okay. So what's there in the middle of the story? So like I told you, the complication, the conflict, the problem involving the main characters, they are in a way elaborated or expanded, okay, in sequence, and this is the middle part of the story. Okay. If the problem or conflict is not introduced in the beginning, it is done here. That means if you have already introduced the problem or the complications of the story in the beginning, you only need to expand it here. You don't need to introduce it here. Okay. If you haven't introduced the problem or the conflict in the beginning, so it is this section, the middle section of the story, where you are going to do that, right? Events related to the characters are discussed here. Okay, you can just describe the characters and the problems that the characters are facing, how the characters are trying to solve the problem, how the characters are trying to resolve the conflicts they have. So all the things, right, all these issues are discussed in the middle part of the story, right, before we go to the ending of the story. Clear? And like I told you earlier as well, the events are written in a sequence, otherwise your readers would be confused, right? You have to be very careful to put your events in sequence, in proper order, so that your readers are not confused. Clear? And then if we look at the ending of a story, so the word itself suggests, so now this is the conclusion part, right, the end of a story. So this part of the story reveals if the characters change or remain same as in the beginning, right? Even in movies you happen to see sometimes the characters at the end, okay, they change. Like sometimes the villains who have been very bad and in the beginning and middle, so they are reformed, right? And sometimes they remain same. So in your story also, the ending reveals whether your characters change or they remain same, right? This is where this thing happens. And then in this part of the narrative or story, the complications and conflicts are resolved. Okay, but please keep in mind, when I am saying the conflicts are resolved, that doesn't mean that it always has to be a happy ending. No, it can be a sad ending as well, right? It can be, your story can end in a way that would surprise your reader, or that would shock your reader as well. Sometimes you are not satisfied. When your story ends, you feel like, this should not be the case. The main character should not have suffered like this. So a sense of a sort of a sympathy you develop for the characters, and this is the intention of the writer. The writer wants the readers to feel that way. Sometimes you are very happy, you are satisfied, a happy ending. And sometimes when the story is ends with a very tragic ending, you are very sad. Okay, because the purpose behind the writer writing a story is to entertain the readers and also in a way try to amuse them or make them feel this way, right? So that it's a writer's choice how the writer is going to end their story. Clear? So the conflict is resolved doesn't necessarily mean it's a happy ending. Clear? It can be either happy or sad, and it can also take the readers by surprise too. So this is what I just want you to keep in mind when you write a story. Do you write stories? Does your teacher tell you to write stories sometimes? Of course, right? Class 5, 6 students may be writing very short stories, and 7 and 8 students might be writing longer stories. You might be creating something out of your imagination, or you may be writing a story about an incident that had happened to you or maybe your friend or your family members, isn't it? So what I want you to do is, next time, today onwards, whenever you write a story, please keep these elements in your mind, and most importantly, writing process. Okay, you need to follow the writing process. Okay, now after this, I'm going to show you a video clip of a story I have read. This is a part of my story reading session here for viewers. And what I want you to do is, as you listen and read the story, try to think about the elements of a story. What are the elements of the story? I'm reminding you. Yes? Characters. So as you read and listen to the story, what I want you to do is think about, these are the characters in the story. See, what we usually do is when we read a story or when we listen to a story, we just listen or read for something else, trying to find the amusement, trying to find what actually happens, isn't it? Or we may be doing it in order to improve our language skills. Okay? But today, as you listen to the story, I want you to focus on the 5 main elements of a story, that is, characters. Try to think about, as you read and listen, who are the characters? And try to identify the main character, or is there, that is what we call protagonist. Okay? And is there any negative character in the story? There's antagonist. Okay? And you can think about, what is the problem or conflict the main character is having in the story? Think about that, right? Problem. And you also think about setting. Okay, the place where the story is happening, because these are the main elements, right? Character, setting, you will think about the plot as well. Okay, and you will think about, I told you, problem, and what else you need to think about? Of course, solution and the resolution part. Okay, how the problems are solved, if many, or if there's just one problem, how it is solved. So at your level, when you write a story, I just want you to keep your problem minimum, right? And as you gain, in a way, skill, you gain mastery over writing stories, then you can increase the number of problems the characters are facing. And see, story writing is not something that you are going to learn in just one session or 1 or 2 days. So it takes a lot of practice, right? Because this is a skill. And what I want you to do is keep practicing, okay? Keep reading more stories, and then you try writing your own story, okay? So will you do that? Very good. Now look at the story. Welcome back to another story reading session. And today I have a level 4 book from Read It Yourself, and the story is titled The Wizard of Oz. Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Dorothy. Dorothy lived on a farm in Kansas, America. She lived with her aunt, her uncle, and her little dog Toto. One day, Dorothy's aunt and uncle were out working on the farm. Dorothy was in the farmhouse playing with Toto. Suddenly, a whirlwind came and carried the farmhouse away. Dorothy was very frightened. "Where are we going to land?" she said to her little dog. They came down in a land full of flowers. Suddenly, a beautiful lady appeared. "Where am I?" said Dorothy. "You are in the land of Oz," said the lady. "I am very pleased to see you. I am the Good Witch." She thanked Dorothy for killing the wicked witch. "What wicked witch?" said Dorothy. "Look under your farmhouse," said the Good Witch. Dorothy looked under the farmhouse. There she saw a witch. On the witch's feet were two magic shoes. Dorothy put on the shoes. "I want to go back home," said Dorothy. "How do I get there?" "You must go to see the Wizard of Oz," said the Good Witch. "He lives in the Emerald City along the yellow brick road. He can help you." "Can you come with me?" said Dorothy. "No," said the Good Witch, "but I will be there when you need me." So Dorothy and Toto followed the yellow brick road. Soon they saw a scarecrow. You can see the scarecrow. "Where are you going?" asked the scarecrow. "We are going to the Emerald City to see the Wizard of Oz," said Dorothy. "I'll come with you," said the scarecrow. "My head is full of straw. I want to ask the wizard for some brains so that I can think." So Dorothy, Toto, and the scarecrow followed the yellow brick road. They passed a man made of tin. "Are you going to see the Wizard of Oz?" asked the Tin Man. "Yes," said Dorothy. "Can I come with you?" said the Tin Man. "I want to ask the wizard for a heart so that I can love." So they all walked along the yellow brick road. Suddenly, an angry lion appeared. "Where are you all going?" asked the lion. "We are all going to the Emerald City to see the Wizard of Oz," said Dorothy. "Can I come too?" said the lion. "I want to ask him for some courage. It's no good being a lion without courage." Dorothy was happy with her new friends. They all followed the yellow brick road together. Soon Dorothy, Toto, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion came to the Emerald City. Everything in the city was made of emeralds. A little man appeared. "We want to see the Wizard of Oz," said Dorothy. "Can you take us to him?" "Follow me," said the little man, and he took them to a beautiful emerald room. There they saw the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy and her friends were frightened. "Wizard, can you help us?" asked Dorothy. "What do you want me to do?" said the wizard. "I would like a brain," said the Scarecrow.
I would like a heart, said the Tin Man. And I would like some courage, said the Lion. And what about you? The Wizard asked Dorothy. What do you want? I just want to go home to Kansas, said Dorothy. I will help you, said the Wizard. But first, you must help me. Go and kill the last wicked witch in the land of Oz. Dorothy and her friends were not very pleased. They didn't know how to kill the last wicked witch. Dorothy, Toto, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion went to find the wicked witch's castle. Suddenly, the witch's flying monkeys came. They carried Dorothy, her friends, and Toto back to the witch's castle. The wicked witch wanted Dorothy's magic shoes. If I have the magic shoes, then I can be the wickedest witch the land of Oz has ever seen, she said. But Dorothy wouldn't give her the magic shoes, so the witch made Dorothy work in her castle. One day, the witch said, "If you don't give me your magic shoes, I will kill your little dog." Dorothy was very angry. She took a bucket of water and threw it all over the witch. "You wicked girl! Your water is killing me," said the wicked witch, and she disappeared. So Dorothy and her friends went back to see the Wizard of Oz. "Now we have helped you," said Dorothy. "Please, will you help us?" So the Wizard of Oz gave the Scarecrow some brains, the Tin Man a heart, and the Lion some courage. "Now I can think," said the Scarecrow. "Now I can love," said the Tin Man. "And I will be a brave lion," said the Lion. "But what about Dorothy?" said the Scarecrow. "I can't help her," said the Wizard. "I don't know how to send her home." Suddenly, the good witch appeared. "Dorothy," said the good witch, "you must ask your shoes to take you home." "Shoes, please take me home," said Dorothy. Suddenly, she was back in her farmhouse with her aunt and uncle. And Dorothy and Toto lived happily ever after. So this is the end of the story. See you soon. Thank you.
Okay, so how was the story? Okay, I guess it might be interesting to see so many characters in the form of animals as well as human beings, right? And what did you find? Who is the main character in the story? The protagonist in the story? Yes? Did I hear Dorothy? Yes, you're right. The main character in the story is Dorothy, right? And then you have her uncle and aunt and Toto, right? And you have some other characters too. And you might have identified who is the antagonist in the story, who's having the negative role, right? And you also kind of think about where the story happened. Dorothy's farmhouse in Kansas, okay? And what was the problem? You also found that in the story, and how the problem was solved, isn't it? And what sort of ending did the story have? A happy ending, isn't it? The problem is solved, and then Dorothy could go to her farmhouse, right? Back to her home with her uncle and aunt. So this is how a story should be, right? You have the characters, you have the plot setting, and then you have the problem and then solution. And you also have the beginning, middle, and ending of the story. Okay, so I think this is all for the first session. Okay, and in our next session, Gidin Stargila will continue with descriptive writing, and I'll see you again in the third session. Thank you.